Okay, good morning. It's great to see you here. It's an important topic we're going to talk about today. I'm just going to kick it off, kind of tell you a few highlights, and then I'm going to turn it over to Captain Bastillos. She's our resident expert over at the hospital, and I'll tell you a little bit about her. Can I have my first slide up there, please? Okay, good. I think I know most of you see a few people out there. Spouses were invited. I'm Dr. Rebecca Johnson. I'm the deputy to Major General Quantock here. Very important topic we're going to discuss this morning, and then hopefully at the end I'm going to come up here and kind of tell you what our expectations are from the command, from General Quantock, and as far as implementing this as a program here at Fort Leonard Wood. I've kind of highlighted up there for you the significance of our health and our fitness. It affects everything in our life. I know some of you know personally, and through experience, when your health isn't well, it's pretty hard to focus on your job and your life and your family when you have serious health problems. And it's important to our nation. It's important to the Department of Defense. I think some of you are very well aware. The President has said it's considered a national security threat, the health and wellness of our nation. For those of us that work every day here in providing services and soldiers and training them, it's important to us in our readiness. Our wellness impacts our readiness. The Department, Army, and DOD have programs that they're instituting as far as health and wellness programs. We here at TRADOC are instituting a health and wellness program. We've got a draft policy I'm working on. I'm going to get it to the CG and we'll get it out to you. But definitely what we're going to get from this is the importance of our health, how it affects our exercise and our wellness, how it affects our lives and how it affects our work, and also how it affects our budget as well. And so we pulled together a lot of research for you. A lot of us are busy in our lives every day. We don't have time to always do all this research. Of course we can. And for some of you, maybe it'll initiate an idea in your mind to go out and do some more research on these areas. But I just want, before I turn it over and let us go through this brief, I just wanted to highlight the significance of health and wellness. And Captain Bastillos is going to talk about some of the leading causes of health deaths in the United States. And two of them are cardiovascular disease. The top two counts about 60% of the deaths in the United States, cardiovascular disease and cancer. And perhaps we might be thinking, well, that's not going to affect me probably. But I just printed this off from the American Heart Society. Cardiovascular disease is the highest cause of disease in the United States. Almost 1 million Americans die from this a year. Heart disease doesn't affect just the elderly. The statistics that we have that she's going to be highlighting for us this morning are from the ages of 35 and older. And like I said, counts for over 1 million deaths. Heart disease is usually preventable, detectable, and preventable, and it goes on to say most of the deaths causes are, nutrition, poor nutrition habits, lack of physical activity. And so we're going to highlight some of those things today. So that's very important to us. Not only does it, we have over 1 million people dying from cardiovascular disease, it also costs our nation about $27.4 billion a year in health-related expenditures. And the burdens of others that have to deal with these in families, it's an estimated $286.5 billion as our population continues to have to help those through these. So that's one area. The other was cancer. Cancer, again, causes a tremendous amount of deaths too, and so those were the top two leading. Again, it said, and I'll just highlight a few things from this. This is from the American Cancer Society. We have over 171,000 cancer deaths a year. Statistic evidence suggests that most of this is related to overweight, obesity, physical inactivity, and poor nutrition again. So if you hear those themes being echoed this morning, it's because that's how important it is to our health and to our family's health. And so the emphasis here is it's not just us, it's also our families, and sharing this information and helping people understand, wellness and fitness go hand in hand. So without that any further here, I'm going to come up at the very end and say a few things as far as what the CG expects with this health and wellness program for Fort Leonard Wood. Our goal is obviously that everybody that works and lives and trains here at Fort Leonard Wood is going to be healthy. And so I'm going to turn it over to Captain Bastila. She's our chief of our nutrition care division over at the Army General Leonard Wood Hospital. She's got a Bachelor of Science in Nutrition and Food Science. You're going to see she's phenomenal. We're lucky to have her here. She's got a Master's of Science in Human Nutrition from Texas A&M, and she's a registered dietitian, and she's going to be pursuing her PhD, hopefully in public health from the university as well. So I'm thrilled to have her here, and she's going to take us through this at the end. We'll hopefully have time for a little bit of questions, and I'm going to finalize at the end. So without that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. How are we doing today? All right, we're feeling good, feeling well, feeling healthy. All right, well, once again, my name is Captain Brenda Bustillos, and I did hear a whoop when she mentioned Texas A&M. So I know I've got some Aggies in the crowd. What we're here to talk about today is something that's not only my job, my career here in the Army. This is my passion. It is my passion to make us a well nation, to make us a well force, so that we can be fit to fight not only as service members but also as a civilian workforce. And we've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of work to do. We're going to talk about some things that affect our health today, what we can do about that, and also some of the things, the wellness initiatives that we're going to be starting here at Fort Leonard Wood as well as Army-wide. All right, and I'd like to make this as interactive as possible, but if you do have questions, please save those for the end, jot them down so that we can roll through this quickly. We've got lots of slides, lots of things to discuss today. All right, so our health, obviously, affects everything that we do. I think one very important quote to me that I'll never forget is that, and I'm trying to remember, this was a physician that I worked with when I was an intern, but there's just no greater blessing in life than your health. We can have so many wonderful things, but if we're in poor health, it affects everything, as you see, your finances, your life, your children, your job, your career. Everything around you is affected by how well you are. Key contributors to our health, which we'll talk about this morning. Just a few of those here. Let me see if I can get this to work. All right. So, do we have any chemical folks in the room? So we'll keep you interested then here on these first couple of slides. We're talking about chemicals and toxins, whether environmentally or those that are chemicals that are ingested behaviorally as well. But we'll talk about EPA here, the Environmental Protection Agency. They test thousands of chemicals, but just a little bit over 2,000 chemicals that have been tested, or environmental toxins. Only these that you see that are highlighted here have been removed or banned for production by Congress. Okay, so we see PCBs, a neurotoxin. We don't see those anymore, but they were used in a number of things. This is tough stuff, these PCBs. So they were used in things like, our solvents, paints. We used them in several items for, on automobiles. We used them for different things, different fluids. And I mean, I could go on and on. Even in the past, I believe early 50s, 1950s, 1960s, they were even used for surgical implants. These are so tough. So you can see there's an important reason why we've removed them. But banned by Congress in 1979, PCB is no longer in production. Chlorofluorocarbon propellant. So you see that in aerosol cans that say no CFCs. That's what these guys are, very dangerous and damaging to the environment. Also dioxin. Dioxin, a poison you find 90% of, a toxin you find 90% of in the flesh of animals, mostly consumed by meat or dairy products. Now, I'm not going to scare you guys, okay? Not going to scare you all against eating meat or dairy products, but they're found mostly coming out of the soils from things that have been produced by production of chemicals either from plants or through the process of what am I thinking of, the power plants and things like that. Some of those chemicals are leached into the soils that are consumed by animals, and then that's how we can consume them. Asbestos, as we know, no longer in use for building products and materials. Also hexavalent chromium. Are any of you familiar with the case, the Aaron Brockovich case, right? Hexavalent chromium, or chromium-6, where this chromium, which highly cancerous, was found in water supplies. And not just there in that case in the water supply in California, but in many different regions across the United States, coming from the production from plants and from the industry. So Toxic Substance Control Act, this particular act, allows the Environmental Protection Agency to regulate and monitor and assess and control the substances or toxins that are in our environment. So the problem is, though, is if you look at my next bullet point here, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they don't think that the Environmental Protection Agency is doing a great job to look at all of the toxins that can be used, that we do use to produce some of the things that we provide for human consumption. So they're doing a lot of work, even currently now, to initiate some laws to get tougher control of these substances. All right, so now to something I really, really know quite a bit about here, foods and cooking methods. When we're talking foods, how many of you have heard that diet or artificial sugars or sweeteners are not good for you? How many of you heard that? All right. I put up there that there's debate on that. And the reason for that is these are products that are generally recognized as safe, okay? Generally recognized as safe. That means safe for human consumption. We haven't seen long-term physiological effects of these sweeteners. But there have been things like saccharin or sweet and low, where you see on the label that these may cause cancer. These compounds may cause cancer. Well, because they have caused cancer in laboratory rats that were fed 10,000 times plus their weight in these compounds, if we eat anything that is in excess, we're going to have a problem, right? We're going to have some toxicity, some issue or concern, but it's still a health concern for many individuals, and that is why it is still listed on that label. So this is one of those that is a may, a might, a possibility that it could be harmful, but we don't have enough research out there yet that shows us anything otherwise. Same thing with hydrogenated oils. So you probably heard of trans fats. Right? Trans fats have been in the media quite often. And those are what hydrogenated oils are. Are they toxic? I don't know. But I do know they're very, very damaging to the cardiovascular system. These are not the type of or foods that contain trans fats and hydrogenated oils, are foods that we want to stay away from. So what you've seen in marketing is that many of these oils have been completely removed from products and processing of foods. Same way with rancid oils. Rancid oils, simply just oils that have gone bad. They've gone rancid. They've stayed past their shelf life. Can they be toxic? Possibly. Possibly. There is debate out there. There's research one way or the other. But I do know that rancid oils, nobody wants to consume anything that is rancid, so we have to be careful in monitoring our own food supply. Same way with high temperature cooking. Acrylamide is a compound that is created when foods or proteins, lipids, or fats are held at a high temperature for a long period of time. So we see acrylamide production from these foods. Good example of this is our fast food restaurants, or even restaurants that don't regularly clean their grills or their fryers. This acrylamide can build up. We see lots of research one way saying that acrylamide can be dangerous and carcinogenic or cancerous. And then other things we've seen that say, well, no, acrylamide really hasn't shown to have any kind of dangerous, deleterious effects. So there are still some debates out there. Science, as I know and love, is ever-changing. So we may find more of this in the future that leads us to a better understanding of these toxins, or possible toxins. Here's another one of my soapboxes here, tobacco and smoking. All right, one of my highlights up there. On average, smokers die 14 years before non-smokers. But usually when I see a smoker and I go, oh, put the cigarettes down, that's so bad for you. They say, well, you know, my uncle smoked for 80 years and never had a problem. Or my grandfather lived until he was 100 and started smoking when he was 14. But that is our true roll of the dice. That really is a roll of the dice when we're talking health because of the effects of smoking. If we take a look at these from the CDC, even secondhand smoke Non-smoking spouses, if you look at this bullet down here, non-smoking spouses of smokers have a 40% higher rate of stroke, greater risk for lung cancer and heart disease. That's just from secondhand smoke. Just from secondhand smoke. So we do, and the statistics don't lie. This is very solid, very reliable research. Same way with chewing tobacco. Because you want to quit smoking, but you pick up chewing tobacco doesn't mean it's any better for you. Okay, you're still getting the effects of that nicotine, which is a toxin. All right, so now we're talking very exciting stuff, right? Household chemicals, hygiene products, bleach and chlorine. As you know, when you open up a bottle of cleaning products and you smell bleach or you smell ammonia, and it kind of takes you back or even makes you choke if you get a little too close to it, there's a reason for that. There's that natural barrier there in your lungs that says, whoa, this is not good for me. So can be very toxic if used in high amounts or exposed to the body. Same way with hygiene and cosmetic products, triclosan, phthalates. These things, even though we see them in cleaning products, cosmetics, facial soaps, there is evidence one way and the other that say, yeah, these are okay for use, we can use them, but then there is evidence as well that says, you know, maybe these aren't so great for us. Maybe we should take a better look at these and see if they do cause any mal effects on the body. Same way with the plastic products. You've probably seen, if you look down on this bottom picture here, the BPA-free bottles. We've seen them on baby bottles, even some things like some of the drinking bottles, the athletic sports bottles. The bisphenol A, there's the research that's both ways, still kind of teetering there, but that's where the American Academy of Pediatrics has said, you know, we don't want to roll the dice, we don't want to play games with this, let's just say this isn't good, we're not going to have this on baby bottles, let's just get this away. So there's a likelihood there. Same way with medications. Even though medications are there to help us and assist us get better, anything in high amounts can be toxic, and amounts more than what we should be taking for our body and what our body can feasibly digest and metabolize. So we have to be careful with excessive intake of medications as well. Farming and industrial. I'm sure you've heard of organic gardening. All right, and organic farming, organic foods and products, and my folks are organic gardeners, so it takes a lot of work to make sure a product is organic, to keep those pesticides, those chemicals away from foods. It's tough, it's expensive, but at the same time, there are lots of organic products and chemicals that can also be toxic if we use them in high amounts. So it's a tough game to play. But in fertilizers and pesticides in your food, just make sure that you're washing your foods very, very well if you're not buying them organically or from local farmers. Also, same thing with hormones and antibiotics that are used in our foods. Lots of this stuff being used nowadays to juice up the cows, increase milk production, increase egg production. All right. Same way here, car exhaust. We know that carbon monoxide gas is poisonous, so please make sure that don't idle your cars for too long. Same way here is air pollution as a toxic. Pesticides and herbicides, anything used around the home, make sure you keep them away so that they're not going to be ingested, especially if you're using them around your plants, any kind of farming equipment, or children. This is a fancy little thing. Let me see if I can get it to work. Here we go. If I can get it to go the right way. Here we are. Toxins accumulate over time, as you see here in the brain, and what toxins can do. Now, remember, this is increased levels of toxin, okay? Increased levels or high toxicity levels and exposure. All right. Now, some of these slides are, here we go. Now I'm getting this to work now. All right, so when we're talking elimination of toxins, as a dietitian, I can't tell you how many times I've had patients come in to see me and say, hey, I found this $85 box of detoxifier and, you know, a system cleaner at the GNC. Is this going to help me? And I say, absolutely not. You've wasted your money. Your body is an amazing, amazing machine. And it does a lot of work that if you just let it do what it's supposed to do, like toxin elimination. All right? Body has natural ways of eliminating these toxins. Xenobiotics are things that are foreign to the body, alien to the body, but we do have natural bacteria in the body that assist with eliminating toxins. You've probably heard of prebiotics or probiotics, right? Prebiotics are already there in the gut, in the intestinal flora. Probiotics are just foods that enhance the intestinal flora to help you have better gut function, as well with detoxification. You find that in something as simple as yogurt, okay, with lactobacillus. Body's natural barriers are your GI system, your lungs, and obviously your skin. But what happens when toxins penetrate through those barriers and go down into being ingested by the body? When they pass these barriers, you've got two major pathways for these toxins to be relieved. First, the gut. So we've heard about when people say, man, he or she has got guts. That person is tough. There's a reason we say they've got gut, because guts are tough. That's tough stuff right there. 70% of the body's antibodies and lymphocytes are right there in the gut. Man, that is a natural detoxifier right there. All right, so once these toxins go through the body, or higher levels of alcohol, even medications go through the body, the gut works to break down these toxins, all right, and to protect the body against the toxins, and then they go down through the liver to be turned into metabolites, which are then excreted through the body. Very easy. No fancy method of excreting toxins needed, all right? Also, there are some, I know this was one thing that we had up here, and we had discussion about infrared sauna and sweating, or something, like sitting by infrared light that might help release toxins. So there's still debate on one way or the other if this would be beneficial for you in toxin release. Also with exercise and sweating, one thing I do know about though in exercise and sweating, that is that when you exercise, that is a gastric stimulant. That's a way to really stimulate the GI to function. And remember that gut is very important for toxic elimination. And so exercise and sweating absolutely can help you with that. So if you note though, also on the bottom, there are some things that cannot be removed that can be highly toxic and dangerous, poisonous to the body. All right, I'm figuring this thing out. Okay, overexposure, this is for electromagnetic radiation. All right, so anyone in here listen to NPR? Anyone? All right, so we're one of the few here. All right, so in NPR a couple of weeks ago, there was a story about cell phone usage. Okay, cell phone usage and how the exposure from electromagnetic radiation from cell phones, or those rays from the cell phones and the antenna, may or may not cause some negative effects to the brain or the body. Okay, so I wanted to look through this a little bit deeper, and what I found is there's some recent research on this, and there's a good deal of research. However, on some of this research, even though some of these subjects were talking on the phone for quite a long period of time, maybe 15 minutes plus, there is brain activity going on where this individual is talking on the cell phone. But when that cell phone is removed, some of that activity remains in some of the subjects, others it does not. We don't have enough evidence to know if overexposure to that over time can cause some negative effects to the brain. Okay, but we do see that there is some activity going on that could cause some effects over time. Okay, that's something that we still just have to get a better grasp on as far as our science is concerned. Same way with microwaves, computer screens, TVs. Another recent study I pulled from the Journal of American Medical Association was taking a look at these types of items to see if the exposure to them could cause negative effects. I know that there are pediatricians, obstetricians who tell pregnant women not to stand too close to the TV, not to stand too close to the microwave, because there is a possibility, there's a likelihood that there could be some effects. We don't know for certain. So it's better just to say, stay away if we don't know. Same thing with ultraviolet light exposure. Be careful when you're out in the sun. Sun is very damaging, but it's also good for you. Those feel-good rays from the sun activates vitamin D in the skin. Elderly, people who are disabled, who don't get enough vitamin D deficiency is pretty high right now in America. We're staying inside too much. We're not getting outside and enjoying the sun as we used to. All right, so love this stuff here. Nutrition, just to talk about this real quick. We eat the way we do for many different things, many different reasons. Why? All right? And taking a look at some of these influences here. We can all say that, well, I just eat what I like and there's nothing that influences me. But oh yes, there are things that can change how you eat and what you eat. Our sensory influences. Have you ever walked into your grandmother's house growing up and smelled apple cobbler or apple pie coming out of the oven? Man, that's a great way to stimulate an appetite right there. So one of the many sensory influences, cognitive influence, advertising. We're all exposed to advertising, and so great influence there as well. Cultural influence. Now, I grew up in Texas, and I love my barbecue, and my father is from Mexico, so you know my starch and my barbecue, okay? But I also know that we have to be careful with consumption, which we'll talk about as far as overconsumption, but cultural influence, how you were raised, certainly plays a role here. Health status as well. When I was an intern, there was a 35-year-old soldier who I was told to go and instruct on a heart-healthy diet. Well, when I took a look at his chart before I walked in his room, this is a 35-year-old soldier who just had a heart attack. 35. Very young man. But when I started thinking, wow, this must have been a genetic thing. You know, he must have had this going through his family. That's a young man to be having these issues. He was a heavy smoker, heavy drinker. He did PT when he had to, and he ate whatever the heck he wanted, and he loved his fried chicken and other things like that. But it showed, and it ended up having a result on him at 35 with a heart attack. So health status, when I walked into his room, he said, oh my gosh, I've got to change. Please let me know what I need to do. That really makes a change or makes an influence on how you eat from that point. And also genetics, yes, certainly plays a role. Nutrients that are essential to us every single day, we got to have them. Regardless what popular diets say, carbohydrates, protein, fats or lipids, water, vitamins and minerals. Now those top 3 nutrients, those provide us fuel in the form of calories. Okay, so that's the fuel in the gas tank. The next is water. So when we're thinking of ourselves and our bodies as automobiles, okay, you've got the gas in the gas tank is the top 3. You definitely need fluid in that automobile in the form of water, okay? And then the bottom 2, of course, are your spark plugs. They do not give you energy, all right? They only help you transport energy, among many other things, but we certainly need all of these nutrients. Now, the reason I put the great debate up here is we all have a choice. We have choices in what we choose and select to consume. We can consume foods that are nutrient dense, or we can consume foods that are calorie dense. Well, if you go back to the slide that was just before this, you probably have your own debate on, wait a minute, aren't calories some of those nutrients? We got some of those calories from nutrients? Absolutely. But in my profession, we have this terminology to show the difference between foods that provide you with a greater number of nutrients versus foods that are just providing you with excess amounts of fuel that your body more than likely is not going to use. Okay, so our nutrient dense versus our calorie dense. Calorie dense foods we have. All right, and the reason I put bleached white flour up there, we've got lots of white flour products. White flour at one point was swinging in the wind as wheat. Whole wheat is great stuff for us, absolutely high in fiber, necessary. We need high fiber foods. Unfortunately, that wheat is just ground to where it's nothing more than a fine powder and bleached. So there were no greater benefit to us when it's white flour, or when we take that white flour and make white flour products that are high in fat. Our fast foods, very high in calories, not too high in those nutrients, the other nutrients that we need, foods that hold a lot of water, vitamins, minerals, even fiber. So, same way with those processed foods, foods that are high in preservatives, as well as microwavable meals. They're quick, they're easy, right? And we're in a fast-paced society. Unfortunately, those foods provide us very little good nutrition that is necessary for life. We have to make sure that we're consuming foods that are not just calorie dense and quick and easy, but foods that are nutrient dense. All right. Most common form of malnutrition in the Western world is obesity. We've got a problem, folks. We're big people. Americans are very big people, and we've got to tackle this as it is a crisis. take a look at where our food consumption was from 1970 to where it is now. Now, I say now, that's 2003, almost 10 years ago, but you can still see the differences here. Fats and oil consumption, if you look at commodity groups in the very top, fats and oils, in the 70s we consumed right at 53 pounds, this is per capita, so per person per year. We bounced up to 86 pounds. That's a 63% jump in the amount of fats and oils that we consume. Where do those fats and oils come from, do you think? From 1970 to somewhat present. Fast food, someone said fast food. Eating in restaurants, eating foods that are highly processed. We eat a whole lot more of those now. Same way with these other foods, you won't see as many or as high a jumps in some of the other items, but I'm pretty impressed though with the fruit and vegetable consumption. We've done much better there. In grain consumption, but that's all grains, not just 100% whole grains. So lots of grain products, lots of fat that we're consuming. All right, so I want you guys to take a look at this, okay? These are our CDC obesity trends. This is American adults. All right, now this slide is for 1985. All the white blocks we didn't have data for at that point. But the blue blocks, the darker the blue gets, the greater number of obese adults or percentage of obese adults are in that state. All right, so let's watch this and see how these slides change. 1985 changing by year, going up. Now it got darker. You see that? So that's up to 19% there from blue. Now we're changing into a 20% or greater than 20% in the amber. Now we're jumping up from the amber going into a burnt orange. All right, now we've jumped up to greater than 30%. Greater than 30% of the population in that state overweight or obese. All right, that's in 2005, 2006, 2007, and Colorado is hanging on for dear life right there. So, all right, I think I've got 2008 as the highest one I have. Nope, 2009. All right. So now remember, this is for a BMI, that's body mass index. That's just your height and your weight. And there is, within that calculation from height to weight, it puts you into whether you're underweight, you're at an appropriate weight, you're overweight, or you're obese. All right, so as you can notice, southern states are having some trouble there as far as obesity is concerned. All right, our children. The very sad and even sickening thing to me is that I'm seeing just as many children in my office to lose weight, to help them tackle hypertension, high blood pressure, to help them with diabetes, to assist them with high cholesterol readings they've recently had. More children that I see than even adults that I've been seeing with problems that we should only be having or that we've only seen before in adults. So I know we've got some statistics that are up here, but the truth behind it is that we really need to work on our children. We need to work on our children. If you take a look at the numbers, these numbers have tripled since 1980. We have children that are more sedentary. They're not eating the way they're supposed to eat. We're eating those quick, high, we gotta go, we gotta move, we gotta get here, gotta get there kind of foods, instead of what they should be eating. And so we'll talk about some of these causes here and some of the changes that can be made. Lifestyle behavioral. I wish I could put I've got so much information and data for you all, but one of my favorite slides is the consumption of what children are drinking now versus what they were drinking in the early 1980s. Water, the good stuff we have to have every day, one of the 6 essential nutrients, has plummeted in children as far as consumption is concerned. What's really high is soda and juice and high sugared beverages. Kids are drinking them every day as everyday liquids. I don't know about you all, but when I was growing up, it was water. That's all you drank. If it doesn't come out of the faucet, you're not going to drink it other than milk. And once on a Sunday, we got an 8-ounce cup of root beer, and that was a treat. That was a treat. So we're having some issues there with overconsumption of those food items. School food options, lots of cuts for school food budgets, for feeding our children, even children who are food insecure, who don't know where their next meal is coming from. We're cutting the funding to those children and providing them adequate food so they get whatever they can. But even school food options, it's a lot cheaper to feed a child a chicken nugget than it is to feed them chicken breast. It's a lot cheaper to feed them the foods that they should not necessarily be eating, so it's a tough battle. Minimum access, once again, I was talking about accessibility. Food insecurity is very, very high in our nation right now. Food insecurity, which means that there are our neighbors, our friends, our family members who don't know where their next meal is coming from. And we've got lots of kids like that in our nation too. So they have minimal access to foods that are good for them. They get whatever they can when they can. As far as activity, there are fewer appealing places, not as many parks, even sidewalks, which would be also nice, and we're not seeing too many of them for children to be able to safely get activity, as well as other things, calorie-dense foods, increased portion sizes, which I'll discuss a little bit more, television media. We've got children living in very sedentary environments, video games. They're not getting outside and playing baseball anymore. They're picking up the video games and playing baseball. All right, as well as stress, which we'll go over and discuss. Things that do affect, this truly does affect weight. Family history, your genetics, medications can affect weight. Social networks, economics, lots of research out there that if children have overweight friends, they're likely to be overweight themselves. Same way with economics, that obesity paradox where people who have less money generally are bigger, have larger weight, more weight on the body. Poor sleeping patterns, also medical problems, thyroid concerns, polycystic ovarian syndrome. So we're discussing portions. Portion size. Do you know that when McDonald's opened, and I'm not going to ask the question, sometimes I say, hey, does anybody remember when McDonald's first opened in the 1950s? But when McDonald's first got kick-started, they served a burger that was, okay, no exaggeration, the size of the burgers that we serve our children now in Happy Meals. Those were the size of the burgers. Now we have monster burgers because of the competition. McDonald's was so popular that other places were popping up and saying, well, if they can sell that burger, then we can sell a bigger, better burger for the same price. And then other competition was popping up, and so burgers got bigger, sodas got bigger, servings of fries, everything across the walls got bigger. We want to get more for our money. That's the bottom line. We've got to have more for our money. Unfortunately, it's caused us some terrible health concerns in relation to diet and overconsumption. We look at soda, how soda has changed. Old soda dispensers used to have this small, now that we call them, oh, they're so cute, right? The cute little small soda bottles, those were servings of soda at one point. Then we went from those small soda bottles, about 6 ounces, to the 12-ounce cans. Not many of us can find cans anymore in dispensers. Now we've gone to 20 ounces. Now our soda dispensers are giving us 20 ounces of soda as opposed to canned soda. Our next step is probably liters, right? Going to liters of soda, and I've already seen them in our shopettes as liters of soda. But take a look at the changes in how much we're consuming as far as calories. Those are liquid calories. They go down easy. We don't think about them. If you're thinking about 15 calories per sugar cube, you've got a small amount of sugar cubes there on the left, relatively, and look how much more you're consuming. So, serving sizes and portions are definitely changing. All right, so we're looking at sandwiches. We used to just use bread, just sliced bread. But now we've got to have 6 inches, and we've got to have foot-longs, and we've got to have all this more for our money type of portion sizes. Same way with bagels. Same way with many other foods. What happened to just having a hot dog, that was what? Something you could just hold in your hand and have at a barbecue. But now you got foot-long hot dogs, or you've got brats. You've got all this other stuff that's more, much more than what we are going to be consuming or should be consuming. So, when you don't waste it, you waste it. I was raised with the idea, my folks always said, you're not moving from that table until you finish everything on the plate. Don't waste food. We can't afford to waste food. All right? Well, what happens to food when you don't waste it? Can't you just store it, save it for later, right? If we're forcing people to eat more than what they need to eat, then the idea is we've got children who think they need to finish everything on the plate regardless how big that plate is. All right, so we're told and we're trained and we're taught to eat more than what our bodies need. All right, so if you take a look at some of these stats up here, where we are as far as our averages and how much we're consuming, 1 pound of weight gain is equivalent to 3,500 calories in excess of what your body needs. If you're consuming more than what your body needs, you store it. This is the only instance in where you want if you were kind of comparing it to a bank account, you want to be in the red. You want to spend more than what you're bringing in. All right. So it's about calories in versus calories out. We got to get moving. We've got to be physical. We've got to keep being physically active, and we've got to eat less. All right. I know this is a verbose slide. There's lots of stuff on here, but please bear with me. I want to go through some of the highlights on this. Obesity in children has been noted as a national security threat, as Dr. Johnson had mentioned, and this isn't just by one or two folks talking. This has been many individuals, all the way up to our commander-in-chief, has said, you know, we've got a problem in this country. According to Army officials, 20% of all Americans ages 17 to 24 were too overweight to serve in the military. I know many folks have come in the military with waivers and had to really work hard to get that weight off. But look at the percentage of those who could not, almost 30%. Also, recruits had failed physical exams because of weight issues, and that increased by 70% since the mid-90s. Almost 60% of female recruits, almost 50% of male recruits failed their entry-level PT test. It was only 20% of the recruits in 2000. So this is only 10 years later. 62% of those recruits had significant enough dental problems that they could not be deployed. They had to get these repaired, even recruits coming into the Army. I've been working with Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, IMT commander, on some of the soldier fueling initiative that we have been enforcing Army-wide, and these are some of the quotes that he has stated and some of the research that they've been doing for the initiative. And it's staggering, these numbers. 85% of those recruits say they eat fast food regularly. 85%. 52.7% said they've used tobacco or do use tobacco. Hip injuries and fractures as well. Now, is it hip injuries and fractures because we're working them too hard? I doubt it. I absolutely doubt it. Could it be the effects of poor nutrition? Possibly. Could it be the effects of lack of physical activity? More than likely. 1998, only one U.S. state reported that more than 40% of their young adults were overweight. 10 years later, 39 states made that same report. There's a significant economic impact, which we'll talk about, and also the medical cost of obesity as well. One thing I hear quite regularly, I'd eat better if I could afford it. I can understand that when you compare a bag of ramen noodles to a can of Healthy Choice soup, that there are differences in cost, great differences, okay? But if we take a look at the long-term costs of poor diet, looking well into the future, not just what we have now, for adults with a BMI of 45, so that once again, body mass index of 45, that's taking me at my height, more than doubling my weight and smashing me into one person. That's a 45 BMI, all right? Your life expectancy will decrease up to 20 years. And that's certainly not an exaggeration. Journal of American Medical Association just recently. Also, changes in BMI as they increased. The hospital costs, look for children, within that 20-year period of time, the obesity-associated annual hospital costs more than tripled for children because we're getting bigger, okay? And I put real-life examples on here bariatric surgery. I started a bariatric surgery program with another physician, a surgeon, out at Fort Sill, and it's amazing how much a life will change by just loss of weight, how much a person's health can improve by just losing weight. We had many of our patients that were there, we had all kinds of things. I mean, they had lists and lists upon lists of medications, health problems, diagnoses that they've carried with them for years. But after they've had, either the bypass or something else that helped them because they had large numbers, I mean, a very, very high BMI, very dangerous BMI. Once they started losing weight post-surgery, it was phenomenal to me. And many folks, within a matter of 1 to 2 months, were off all but just a handful of medications. They had no longer had to take insulin for diabetes. They no longer had to take their blood pressure medication because now their blood pressure was fine, just by the loss of weight. Inflammatory foods, the reason I commented here on why we have them titled inflammatory is it's a popular buzzword now as far as inflammatory is concerned, just by definition, meaning that being pro-inflammatory, leading to a faster aging process. But this is linked to chronic overweight, okay, and chronic consumption of foods such as these refined sugars, highly processed carbohydrates. We're not talking 100% whole grains here. Hydrogenated oils, processed meats, anything that's gone through a high processed type of whether it's been put through the ringer, so to speak, on most of these foods, then chances are they're not foods you want to consume on a regular basis. They're pro-inflammatory. And a lot of it has to do with us not eating at home as much as we used to. All right, if you look down here on this corner, the effects of food that's consumed away from home, and you look at that maroon block that's in the middle, those are obese adults. All adults are linked on the blue, and then in the amber are normal and underweight adults. Now, the numbers of food that are consumed away from home and the increases in calories, the people who were in an obese category were consuming a lot more food and calories away from home. That was their primary area of consumption, much lower in people who were average or at an ideal body weight. There we go. Foods that we should be consuming most often, beans and legumes. As far as beverages, we need a lot more water. We're not doing well at consuming enough water. I put herbal teas up here because herbal teas and even coffee in moderation has been found to have beneficial health effects. Omega-3 rich foods like fish, fatty fishes, salmon, halibut, even tuna fish, walnuts, flaxseed. If they're fruit and vegetables of a lot of color, those are the ones you want to eat. I had a patient one time tell me, well, I do eat my vegetables. And all the vegetables that he mentioned were different forms and different preparations of potatoes, which are great. Sweet potatoes are great. They're wonderful for you, but you got to put color on your plate. Make sure lots of color. Nuts also high in beneficial oils and omega-3 fatty acids, as well as oils themselves, select oils. And some of the snacks that I threw up here, I put white popcorn, because I'm not talking movie theater butter or Mallow Blaster, all those fancy popcorns up there. Natural white popcorn is very high in fiber. It's a great snack. Same way with pretzels, and all in moderation, of course. Cheese sticks, not those mozzarella cheese stick monstrosities that you can get at fast food places. I'm talking the part skim cheese sticks that you can find in a dairy section. Tuna and hummus are just some examples. Now, we were talking about fighting those toxins. Phytochemicals, what you find in those brightly colored fruits and vegetables, that's what you want to put on your plate, because these help to fight toxins in the body, also have been helped to rid the body of not just fighting toxins, but also preventing cancer. All right. For those who have cancer, and some of the studies that have been conducted, people have very low consumption of fruits and vegetables. Just a few more statistics here for you as far as cancer is concerned. Dietary changes, it's amazing. Changes in diet, what it can do to your life. And that's a behavioral thing. That's a choice. You can choose to to improve your health through diet. Sleep, stress, and exercise, and please cut me off anytime, ma'am. Sleep, stress, and exercise here. We all know that we need to get plenty of sleep, right? We know sleep is important. But what's even more important, too, is that lots of research that I've been looking at recently has shown that there is a great correlation between the amount of sleep you get and how much you weigh. People who sleep less weigh more across the board because of hormonal releases from lack of sleep. We get hormones, there are two hormones in our body, leptin and ghrelin. Leptin helps suppress appetite, ghrelin helps to increase appetite. When you haven't slept enough, ghrelin increases. And when you've got a ghrelin increase, you feel like you're hungry all the time. You feel like you haven't eaten enough, or you crave the foods that you wouldn't typically eat if you'd slept well. So sleep, very important for weight. Stress as well. When we're talking hormones, you don't want to mess with those hormones too much. Cortisol levels can raise when you have high levels of stress, especially stress that is not regulated well. And exercise. We'll talk a little bit more about the importance of exercise. But we all know, especially as military members, even retirees, the importance of exercise on the body. Not just because we have to do it because we wear the uniform, but because it's essential to keep us healthy. More of the impacts here of reduced sleep. We know that lack of sleep when you're behind a vehicle is just as dangerous as if you were intoxicated. Right? You're just as much of a health threat to other people around you when you haven't slept enough. Same way at work. Lack of productivity, you're not going to be beneficial to anyone if you are not getting enough sleep. Some points here on stress and heart disease. We know that heart disease is the #1 killer of Americans. We know this, #1 killer of women, right? And stress, among other things, can increase our risk. All right, let's talk about finding balance here. If I can get my clicker to work. Here we are. You know, I had some great comics, but I love this picture, so I left it up. I thought, you know, this is great. One of my favorite things to do is laughing. If we take ourselves lightly and we don't take the world too seriously, we live a lot better. Attitude is everything. So we keep a positive attitude. Look at all the health effects, health benefits from laughter. Of course, reducing stress, releasing those feel-good hormones. I'll be honest with you, when I'm in pain, I laugh. I laugh because to me it helps me feel better. You know, when you know, you're going through any kind of, you know, someone's pulling out a splinter, yanking a tooth. When I was growing up, laughing always helped me. So laughter is certainly the best medicine. Once again, we talked about some of the causes of death of Americans. Heart disease, #1, but those top 4 here are on the decline. Now, I will say, if you look at those top 4 numbers there, your risks are incredibly high if you're a smoker. Incredibly high for those top 4 that are here on this list. Unfortunately, suicide has now made the list. Suicide was not one of the top 10, and it is now. So watch out for your neighbors. Make sure you're taking care of each other. Risk factors of heart disease. And I don't think it's a coincidence that overweight and obese is on the top. Yes, smoking is a great risk factor. But when you're overweight or you're in an obese category, I will tell you, your risk factors for all comorbidities and disease are much, much higher. Who's heard of LDL cholesterol? This is exciting stuff, right? LDL cholesterol. All right, LDL. When you're thinking of L, all right, how I teach my patients is I say lousy. L is for lousy cholesterol. You've also have HDL, which I call happy cholesterol. So we'll talk about HDL as well. All right, but when you go get a lipid panel, and you talk to your physician, they give you a lipid panel, you find out what your total cholesterol is. You also get an LDL and HDL that are listed, all right? Now these work against each other, your HDL and your LDL. LDL, this is the bad guy here, all right? These are your low-density lipoproteins. You see what these can do when they're floating through the bloodstream. All right, they can, in higher amounts, and if they're not regulated and not controlled by your HDL as well as diet and exercise, they can cause some very damaging effects. As you can see, there are some causes that we have listed here for your higher HDL. All right, so we've got things like, obesity, of course, your stress, but also behavioral factors, behavioral causes, and ways to lower your LDL. Watching the fats and the types of fats that you're consuming. If there's a fat that is solid at room temperature, it is a saturated or a trans fat if it's solid at room temperature. Those are fats that you want to avoid. All right, so some of your butters and margarines. All right, I'm breaking some hearts here. Some of the, your Crisco and that kind of thing. Trans fats as well that are used in highly processed foods. All those thick, viscous fats look the same way on the inside of your body as they do on the outside. All right, increase the amount of dietary fiber. Fiber is not only good for the digestive tract, but it's the broom for the body entirely. Helps to clean out the heart as well and lower your risk of diabetes as well as heart disease. Exercise, fitness, consuming healthier fats. Same way here with HDL in order to raise that HDL, which is the good cholesterol level. The very same thing here. Things that lower your HDL are things that raise your LDL. So like I said, they work against each other. It's kind of like a Pac-Man game. You want more of those HDLs to take away those LDLs out of your body. For blood pressure, we call this the silent killer, right? If for whatever reason that you feel like you're dizzy, you just your heart is not beating regularly as it has done before, please make sure you keep an eye on your blood pressure. All right, hypertension is not something that you want to ignore or avoid. Your risk factors are listed here on the left. You can lower your blood pressure by monitoring the amount of sodium that you consume. Typical American diet has quite a bit of sodium, salt in the diet. The recommendations, for your RDA recommendations, that's right at 2,400 milligrams. Now, the DRIs, which are this is more of an updated recommendation on what you should be consuming, much lower than that, at about 1,500 milligrams of sodium. Do you know that 1 teaspoon of iodized salt, iodized table salt, is equivalent to 2,400 milligrams of sodium? Has 2,400 milligrams in it. So that's only 1 teaspoon. All right, so we think of some of the foods that we consume out of the home. If we're not regulating the amount of sodium that we put in them, we can only imagine how much sodium we're consuming every day. I've put up here the DASH, the DASH, is a dietary pattern that we provide to people who have high blood pressure. And it's just dietary approaches to stopping hypertension. And it's a way that we discuss and talk with individuals and educate them on how they can lower their daily intake of sodium. Because sodium works to constrict. It's a vasoconstrictor. And it keeps those, instead of keeping your vessels nice and dilated where that blood can flow, it constricts them and causes serious problems. And therefore, issues with hypertension, it's hard to control that hypertension when you have high consumption of sodium. Also exercise, of course, and medication can regulate and control those. All right. Have some information up here on physical activity. Recommendations on physical activity are at least 30 minutes a day, most days of the week, for physical activity. At least 30 minutes a day, most days of the week. Now, if you're not used to physical activity, if you've been inactive for a long period of time, I don't recommend jumping into something and going gung-ho with physical activity. You've got to take it nice and easy and nice and slow and work your way into it. And we'll talk about why here in just a minute, one of the other slides. But physical activity we need a lot more of, especially as we age, and we're all aging. So our strength, what we have, there's a word up there I've put in parentheses called sarcopenia. And that is just a condition of muscles that have deteriorated over time. We become sarcopenic as we age. If you notice that if you have elderly parents or grandparents, that makes them, it's difficult for them to open up a bottle or a jar of pickles, or there's something that they used to do that they just can't do anymore. And it's that loss of strength. It's that loss of muscle mass as we age. So fitness, not just important to help us maintain our weight, but as we age, we need those muscles. Remember, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it, right? And that's exactly what happens when you age. You start to lose your strength. Bone mass as well can weaken. You know that when some elderly, and we see this in elderly women mostly, when they fall and have a broken hip or a broken leg or something happens, do you know that majority of the time, those individuals have already broken those bones before the fall has ever even occurred because of weakened bone mass of age. It's not the fall that breaks it. It's the bone, the decomposing over time. So, importance of strength training. If you take a look here, if you were to draw from the age 40 over to age 80 and compare as far as the strength and the advantage of training, you can be just as strong at 40 or just as strong as at 80 as you could be at 40, and vice versa. So as the strength training is incredibly important for life, not just to make sure you get up and walk, but it's that pounding of the pavement. It's that lifting of the weights. My mom has been very excited because recently she's been doing a lot more work on the treadmill, but I said, okay, great, now you're increasing what you're doing on the treadmill, now add some weight to it. So she's picked up these hand weights that she's been working with because she's doing some strength training at the same time and working on getting her cardiovascular activity because I've noticed that her strength has gone down drastically over time. So we want to make sure that we improve that, as well as flexibility, range of motion. Once again, if you don't use it, you lose it. Some of the benefits there of remaining strong and flexible. Cardiovascular longevity can get a kickstart at 40 if people flee the couch to the gym and adopt an active lifestyle. After age 40, they can cut their risk of developing coronary heart disease by 55%. Just like with smoking. Somebody who quits smoking can already start to see immediate effects of improvement to the body just by that quitting of smoking. Same way with exercise. But it also works in the reverse. If you stop exercising, the benefits of exercise also stop. Now, if you decide to not exercise for a long time, but then you want to join some folks in a regimental run and they're going for 4 or 5 miles, keep in mind that you could have some negative effects there from that. Exercise and acute cardiac events, you can't just jump right back into a cardiovascular or any type of physical activity program. You have to work your way into it. Now, I know that you've probably have seen some reports of individuals who have run marathons or half marathons or something, and they crossed the finish line, or maybe they didn't cross the finish line, and then they had a cardiac event. And for some individuals, that could have been due to lack of training, or others, it could have been some something else, some other underlying cardiac factor that they weren't aware of. But for most people who have these concerns, they haven't trained properly, or they jump into something thinking that they're just fine and they can do the way they've always done, and have had some issues with that. So please make sure that you are for any big event that you're training properly, and not just to jump right into being physically active. Take your time. Just as the body and the muscles fade, so can the brain. And to keep your brain sharp and keep it functioning well for the remainder of your life, please make sure that you incorporate exercise, not just for physical muscle, bone structure and continuing that function, but also for brain function. And I threw in my own little blurb down here on the bottom, which is read. Being the daughter of a librarian, I know it's important to also keep your brain functioning and to exercise your brain as well. So make sure that you maintain brain function throughout your life. All right, so in summary here, making sure that you are eating a variety of foods. All right, I know I grew up with a lot of meat and potatoes, guys, but I will tell you that great improvements can come with improvements in behavior modifications. And eating a variety of fruits and vegetables, adding color, getting the right fats and oils and adding them into to your diet, as opposed to those thick, viscous, dangerous fats. Ensuring adequate protein and lean protein at that. Planning ahead, preparing your meals. If possible, limit the amount of times that you're spending outside of your home eating meals. And spend more time at home with meals that are prepared and you know what is going into those foods. Eat your breakfast, eat smaller meals throughout the day. Breakfast, the most important meal of the day. You break it up, it says break fast, that's what you got to do. Break the fast from the night, eat your breakfast, eat throughout the day. Limit your exposure to toxins. Be careful when, of course, you're around the toxins that we discussed earlier because there are possibilities there that there could be causing deleterious effects to health. Plenty of exercise. Make sure you're meeting recommendations when possible. Sleep, incredibly important. Getting plenty of sleep, at least 8 hours. 7 to 8 hours is a goal a night. Avoid overuse of caffeine. I love my coffee, but as long as you get black coffee, don't put anything else into it. Consume it minimally. Stay away from energy drinks. Those are not good, not beneficial in any way. Limit your eating out, your processed foods, soda, or any other high energy, high sugar beverage. Also manage your stress, exercise, smile, and laugh, of course. All right. Yeah. All right, well, thank you. Thank you.
I just had a few closing remarks. I know everybody's dying to eat lunch. So what are our expectations from the command? Our expectations are that you're going to take this brief. We've actually had this brief taped. This is our goal is for the workforce and the civilians, the soldiers, the trainees, everyone at Fort Leonard Wood is going to be healthy. And I know a lot of people are. So for those of you that are, we're going to share that with everyone. But the intent here is for every director to have some kind of session with your folks and pass this on. We're going to get our own Fort Leonard Wood health and wellness policy out. Some of you may have seen General Dempsey, one of his last, I don't know, sir, if you were there, one of General Dempsey's last video teleconferences with us. He had just been to Europe, just got back, and he could not resist by saying at our teleconference, he said, I was just in Europe, and most of the people over there are very active. They walk a lot. You see a lot of older people bicycling, families bicycling. He said the portion sizes are much smaller, and you don't see the obesity. He said, as soon as I got off the airplane in the United States, you see the obesity. And he turned and he said, and he was literally closing the VTC, he said, my challenge to each of you, and I'm going to paraphrase slightly what he said, my challenge to each of you is to go out and convert one person. Each one of you go out and convert one person and help them to lose weight, get thin, and get healthy. Not just for our Army and the service in our Army and what we do for our nation and the defense of our nation, but for the health of our nation as well. So that was his challenge he left with us. He didn't go on and say, then I'm going to tell you how to do this. That's up to us. TRADOC's coming up with their policy. We're coming up with ours. But the intent is to share this with your workforce, share this with everyone, and get it out there, and we'll establish a good program across Fort Leonard, and everyone will be healthy. So I think, let's give another hand to Captain Vastilis. Great job there. Sir, did you want to say anything before we let everybody go to a healthy lunch?
Yeah, the only thing I want to add is it hits on the balance piece. I think that's really important. One of the interesting things, I was in Europe a couple of months ago, and Melissa and I were on the subway driving around, and we were sitting down there, and this lady just looked up at the sign and saw McDonald's advertisement up there. And her comment in her British accent looking at it, she says, I just hate those McDonald's advertisements. They want us to be fat, just like Americans. And Melissa and I are saying, wow. I mean, that's pretty damn powerful. So, it's about balance. It's about fitness into your life, even if that means getting up a little bit early. What I used to be for my entire life was, every day I go out and run 10 miles, because at that time the metabolism was pretty fast. But as I've grown, I just can't go out and run 10 miles every single day, so I've had to balance and actually start eating a whole lot better. And I got to tell you, when I was creeping up, and all of a sudden I bought my first pair of 38 waist pants, I said something has got to change. And I really started getting after taking the sugars out of my diet and just staying below anything and getting all the sugars out of my diet, and I've brought my waist back down to 33. I've taken 5 inches off my waist in the last 6 months just getting sugars out of my diet, because diabetes is on the rise. And it's killing a lot of Americans out there. Just getting after the sugars and getting after the fitness and creating balance in your life is huge. And laughing. If you don't laugh, at least a couple times out of the day, I mean, I think that's why they give aids to general officers, because they are my biggest source of laughter. I highly encourage you to get your own aid out there, because they do a lot to make people laugh every day. But you got to laugh a couple days. If you aren't doing that, you know, it's just a sad way to exist. And we have a lot of laughter up there. I think sometimes in the command group, I try to create a lot of laughter, mostly because of the stupid things. But everybody needs to laugh at least a couple times a day. Other than that, have a great lunch. Don't eat anything. And you can't eat 3 hours of sleep.